So it's a great pleasure to be running this course. I just realized that the coronavirus is known as COVID-19. And it's quite beautiful that the 19, as we know, as we've studied in the Dawnbreakers, has the abjad value. That 19, the word that relates to that is obviously Vahed, which is unity, which is one. And in a very strange way, this has brought us all together. There are probably better ways of bringing us all together than a mass disease. However, we will take this opportunity and we'll get to study and go along this journey. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick recap of where we were at. We basically ended up finishing the first chapter is what we did. So we're going to go into it. I'm going to break it down a little bit. And if you guys want to add anything, this story, the Dawnbreakers, that we know was penned by a guy called Mullah Muhammad Ali, aka Nabil, between 1887 and 1888, on the request of Baha'u'llah. And he put together all his notes, and then it was basically turned into a book by the Guardian in 1932. And the first language it was written in as a book was English, as a gift to the Baha'is of the West. It doesn't mean if you're not in the West that it's not a gift for you. My friend Mahaja from Bangladesh, it's a gift for you as well. It's a book that's meant to inspire us. It's a book of meditation, the Guardian says. So we looked at some quotes in the first session. But what we're going to do is we're going to catch up with where we left off last time. Very quickly from the top, the first person in our story is none other than Sheikh Ahmed. And this is the best photo painting we have of him. He was a very cheery man, Sheikh Ahmed, a very, very erudite, phenomenal character. The other person is none other than Sayyid Kazim. These are the main two players in the first chapter. So we know that Sheikh Ahmed went from Bahrain. He went up to the Oxford and Cambridge of Shia Islam study, which are in places called Karbala and Najaf. And he went there to study and really understand Islam and also stop the corruption that he felt had set in, unfortunately. So he became a mujtahid, which is a very high-level priest. From there, he's drawn to go in search in Persia. And he knows that the promised one's coming. He knows that the Qaim's coming from his studies of the Quran. He has his own sect, his own kind of split of Shia, of the Shi'is, and he's known as a Sheikhi. So anyone who follows him is known as a Sheikhi. So there are, I think, 100,000 Sheikhis or so round about now and around today, if I'm not mistaken. So he goes and he heads down to Shiraz. We know he stops off at this mosque and he's blown away by this mosque. We covered all that last time. He then goes to the dream place to go for slippers, a place called Yazd. And again, if you want to buy any slippers, highly recommend going to Yazd. Not now, wait for the virus to die down. While he's in Yazd, he meets the one and only Sayyid Kazim. Sayyid Kazim, a very interesting character who basically has a dream. And in his dream, he's told that he should go and be the disciple of Sheikh Ahmed. And this is someone who had mastered the Quran. He'd learned it off by heart by the age of 11. And for me to think, like, could I have done that 14 years ago? Like, no way, that's like crazy. He also mastered a whole bunch of prayers by the age of 14, and just an absolutely incredible guy. Whilst there in Yazd, the king writes to him, the Shah writes to him, Fath Ali Shah, I think it was at the time. He writes to him and he says to him, I have some difficult questions that I want you to answer. Sheikh Ahmed, no problem. He answers these questions, hits the king back. The king's like, oh my God, you're amazing. I want you to come and visit me. Sheikh Ahmed says, I would love to. However, my plan was to go to Mashhad. And in Mashhad, we have the shrine of Imam Reza, the 8th Imam of Shia Islam. And this mosque in Mashhad is the second largest mosque by capacity in the world. We're talking around the year sort of 1816, 1815, when they're in Yazd, and then when they move to Mashhad, around this sort of time, he can feel that something's happening in this place called Nur. He turns to it and he makes reference to it. Then himself and Sayyid Kazim end up going to Tehran to see the king. They go to see the king. Whilst they see the king, he's described as an honor to the nation, a glory to the nation. And an ornament of his people. This is the reverence and the love that the king has for him. So he's there, and all of a sudden, one day, he turns around and he just sort of starts praying towards Nur. And it's there he suddenly realized that an auspicious event has taken place. A king is born. Who is this king? This king, of course, is Baha'u'llah. Now, how he knew this blows my mind. Sheikh Ahmed had the knowledge to know this. We know that he had this little this kind of daydream, this dream with involving the Imam Hassan and saliva transferring from the mouth, which gave him the knowledge to know all this stuff. He had previously mentioned Sheikh Ahmed to Sayyid Kazim that he would be the one that would take over the reins. He'd praised him. There were people that were not happy about this in the slightest, but this was the situation. He then decides that he wants to really stay there and face Nur and be in the presence of Baha'u'llah. However, there's different designs. The king says, my nephew really wants to see you. And he's in a place called Kermanshah, which is over here. So they basically have to go down to Kermanshah. They spend quite a lot of time between Tehran and Kermanshah, 2 years, it seems, from my understanding, because then we have a situation where Sheikh Ahmed loses his child. His child, a baby is born called Sheikh Ali. And he says so beautifully that this loss of the child is a sacrifice for the new Ali that's born. The new Ali, of course, referring to none other than Sayyid Ali Muhammad, His Holiness the Bab, who was born. So we have this story here, and then they're going to be heading back to Karbala. I'm just going to pause that with what they're doing there. The other thing that we studied and we learnt about was the story about whilst in Yazd. Okay, this story where you had two people. You had somebody by the name of Abdul Wahab. You had another person by the name of Abdul Khalid Yazdi. And these two were friends, and they went to study with Sheikh Ahmed. Abdul Khalid Yazdi was very erudite, very smart, almost a bit arrogant. Wahab was a very down-to-earth sort of person who still knew what was going on. Sheikh Ahmed decided that he wanted to spend more of his time with Abdul Wahab. Abdul Wahab then has a friend that he basically, his best friend, somebody by the name of Haji Hassan Naini. And these two are super close. And people are talking about what's happened to Abdul Wahab, because obviously Sheikh Ahmed is teaching that the Ghaem, the promised one of all ages, is coming. He's on his way. And this is the message that Sheikh Ahmed keeps on teaching. Abdul Wahab was mistaken for a dervish. He seemed to withdraw from society almost, and people thought, is he trying to take power over the Sufis and the rest of it? Wasn't interested in that at all. Naini, who's Abdul Wahab's best friend, is encountered by a new character called Mirza Mahmud Gamsari. So we have this in the Dawnbreakers, the situation where Nabil, the author of this book, goes to Kashan and he has a conversation with him. And he says to him, what do you know? Obviously, Nabil's going around and he's collating all this information. And Gamsari is 90 years old. And he's saying, I remember when I was a young boy in Kashan, I was with Naini. And I remember one day, he just prostrates himself. And he starts saying, Allahu Akbar, God is the most great. And then he talks about someone being born. And he's saying, it's now revealed. What's been revealed? Apparently, this promised one, something's been revealed. This was in the year 1817. What happens after this? In Kashan later on, Gamsari, who had heard of the Bab in Shiraz, he'd heard that there was this person called claiming to be the Bab in Shiraz. He hadn't managed to go and visit him. While he's in Kashan, the Bab comes up and he stays at Haji Mirza Jani's house for 3 days, which Gamsari doesn't get to visit him, unfortunately, but he ends up becoming a Babi. And he's like, wow, he's a Babi. When was the Bab born? Because he remembers what had happened with Naini. He remembers. And he says, when was the Bab born? It was 1817, right? No, it was 1890, 1235 in the Islamic calendar. And he's really confused. He's absolutely perplexed. It's not until later on that when he's in Baghdad, I think it is, he ends up meeting someone called Haji Mirza Kamaluddin Naraghi, who basically shares with him this work of Baha'u'llah, this Ode to the Dove, and some of the hidden words. And it's at this point that Gamsari is like, wow, I believe. Who is this? And he hears about Baha'u'llah. He then asks, when was Baha'u'llah born? Lo and behold, Baha'u'llah was born in 1817. And this is why he was so confused all that time. He was like, how did Naini get it 2 years wrong? How did he get it 2 years wrong? But he didn't realize that it was actually the coming of Baha'u'llah. that ties up most of the stories in the first chapter. We're going to go back to Sheikh Ahmed and Sayyid Kazim, remember, who were in Kermanshah. They end up coming back to their base in Karbala. From Karbala, Sheikh Ahmed makes it very clear that the coming of the Promised One is very soon. He says to Sayyid Kazim, you are in charge, and I am going to go on pilgrimage. And he says, the Bab will not appear until I'm dead and you're dead. This is not going to happen. And he says, anyway, I'm going to go on pilgrimage. You will be in charge. As he's going from Karbala to Najaf, Sayyid Kazim decides to do the honorable thing, and he says, let me walk with you. Let me come with you and see you off, because they're heading down south towards this area of Hijaz where we have Mecca and Medina. He's coming down, and Sheikh Ahmed turned to him and said, there is no time to lose. Let's stop messing around. Stay here. Tell people, prepare people for the way. When he goes down, Sheikh Ahmed, to Mecca and Medina, this is where he passes away. It's rumored at the age of 81, and is buried in the cemetery of Baha'i, where apparently the Shias believe that's where Adam and Noah are also buried. That's basically what happens in our first chapter.
The news of the passing of his beloved master brought unspeakable sorrow to the heart of Sayyid Kazim. Inspired by the verse of the Quran, fain would they put out God's light with their mouths, but God only desireth to perfect his light, albeit the infidels abhor it. He arose with unswerving purpose to consummate the task with which Sheikh Ahmed had entrusted him. He found himself, after removal of so distinguished a protector, a victim of the slanderous tongue and unrelenting enmity of the people around him. They attacked his person, scorned his teachings, and reviled his name. At the instigation of a powerful and notorious Shia leader, Sayyid Ibrahim-i Ghazvini, the enemies of Sayyid Kazim leagued together and determined to destroy him. Thereupon, Sayyid Kazim conceived the plan of securing the support and goodwill of one of the most formidable and outstanding ecclesiastical dignitaries of Persia, the renowned Haji Sayyid Muhammad Baqir-i-Rashidi, who lived in Isfahan and whose authority extended far beyond the confines of that city. This friendship and sympathy, Sayyid Kazim thought, would enable him to pursue untrammeled the course of his activities and would considerably enhance the influence which he exercised over his disciples. Would that one amongst you, he was often heard to say to his followers, could arise and, with complete detachment, journey to Isfahan and deliver this message from me to that learned Sayyid. Why is it that in the beginning you showed such marked consideration and affection for the late Sheikh Ahmed, and have now suddenly detached yourself from the body of his chosen disciples? Why is it that you have abandoned us to the mercy of our opponents? Would that such a messenger, putting his trust in God, might arise to unravel whatever mysteries perplex the mind of that learned Sayyid, and dispel such doubts as might have alienated his sympathy. Would that he were able to obtain from him a solemn declaration testifying to the unquestioned authority of Sheikh Ahmed, and to the truth and soundness of his teachings. Would that he also, after having secured such a testimony, might visit Mashhad and there obtain a similar pronouncement from Mirza Askari, the foremost ecclesiastical leader in that holy city, and then, having completed his mission, might return in triumph to this place. Again and again did Sayyid Kazim find opportunity to reiterate his appeal. None, however, ventured to respond to his call except a certain Mirza Muhit-i-Kirmani, who expressed readiness to undertake this mission. To him, Sayyid Kazim replied, "Beware of touching the lion's tail. Belittle not the delicacy and difficulty of such a mission." He then, turning his face towards his youthful disciple, Mulla Husayn Ibushrui, the Baha'u'llah, addressed him in these words: "Arise and perform this mission, for I declare you equal to this task. The Almighty will graciously assist you and will crown your endeavors with success."
Thank you, Az. Thank you very much. Beautifully read. So, what's going on? We've got this situation where Sayyid Kazim is now the head. Okay, Sayyid Kazim is now the head of the Shaykhi school. Unfortunately, Sheikh Ahmed has passed away. So Sayyid Kazim now is is basically in charge. But there's a lot of people who have an issue with the Shaykhi school because they're worried about power going. People are power hungry. So there's a lot of people that have wanted to knock down Sheikh Ahmad for a long time, but they weren't able to do so because they were too powerful. Now they're thinking, and led by this guy, Ibrahim al-Ghazvini, let's take down Sayyid Kazim. We can do this now. Sheikh Ahmad's gone, let's bring down the Shaykhi school. Let's fight hard. Let's bring this whole thing down. Sayyid Kazim comes up with a plan because he's like, well, I need some backup here. So he says, right, there are two people that I need support to be gained from, because previously these big mujtahids and these big scholars in other towns had given them their support. One of them is Muhammad Baghir Rashdi, who's in Isfahan. Okay, so bear in mind these guys are in Karbala. One of them is here, so Muhammad Baghir Rashdi in Isfahan. The other one is Mirza Askari in Mashhad. So there are these two people, and he says, look, you need to go and you need to get the support and ask them why they're not supporting us. Who's going to do this? We need someone to go and do this. The tall, thin, lean Mirza Mohit, not Mirza Muppet. Mirza Mohit puts his hand up and he's like, I'll do it, I'll go. Beware of touching the lion's tail. Says, you don't know what you're messing with. Sayyid Kazim refused Mirza Mohit's request to go and do it. He then turns to Mulla Husayn and he says, you're the man. I don't think they were the exact words that he said, you're the man, but he basically asks him to go and do it.
Mulla Husayn joyously sprang to his feet, kissed the hem of his teacher's garment, vowed his loyalty to him, and started forthwith on his journey. With complete severance and noble resolve, he set out to achieve his end. Arriving in Isfahan, he sought immediately the presence of the learned Sayyid, clad in mean attire and laden with the dust of travel. He appeared amidst the vast and richly apparelled company of the disciples of that distinguished leader, an insignificant and negligible figure. Unobserved and undaunted, he advanced to a place which faced the seat occupied by that renowned teacher, summoning to his aid all the courage and confidence with which the instructions of Sayyid Kazim had inspired him. He addressed Haji Sayyid Muhammad Baqir in these words, "Hearken, O Sayyid, to my words, for response to my plea will ensure the safety of the faith of the Prophet of God, and refusal to consider my message will cause it grievous injury." These bold and courageous words, uttered with the directness and force, produced a surprising impression upon the Sayyid. He suddenly interrupted his discourse, and, ignoring his audience, listened with close attention to the message which the strange visitor had brought. His disciples, amazed at this extraordinary behavior, rebuked this sudden intruder and denounced his presumptuous pretensions. With extreme politeness, in firm and dignified language, Mulla Husayn hinted at their discourtesy and shallowness, and expressed surprise at their arrogance and vainglory. The Sayyid was highly pleased with the demeanor and argument which the visitor so strikingly displayed. He deplored and apologized for the unseemly conduct of his own disciples. In order to compensate for their ingratitude, he extended every conceivable kindness to that youth, assured him of his support, and besought him to deliver his message. Thereupon, Mulla Husayn acquainted him with the nature and object of the mission with which he had been entrusted. To this, the learned Sayyid replied, "As we in the beginning believed that both Sheikh Ahmed and Sayyid Kazim were actuated by no desire except to advance the cause of knowledge and safeguard the sacred interests of the faith, we felt prompted to extend to them our heartiest support and to extol their teachings. In later years, however, we have noticed so many conflicting statements and obscure and mysterious allusions in their writings that we felt it advisable to keep silent for a time and to refrain from either censure or applause. To this, Mulla Husayn replied, "I cannot but deplore such silence on your part, for I firmly believe that it involves the loss of a splendid opportunity to advance the cause of truth. It is for you to set forth specifically such passages in their writings as appear to you mysterious or inconsistent with the precepts of the faith, and I will, with the aid of God, undertake to expound their true meaning. the poise, the dignity and confidence which characterized the behavior of this unexpected messenger greatly impressed Haji Sayyid Muhammad Baqir.
He begged him not to press the matter at this moment, but to wait until a later day, when in private converse he might acquaint him with his own doubts and misgivings. Mulla Husayn, however, feeling that delay might prove harmful to the cause he had at heart, insisted upon an immediate conference with him about the weighty problems which he felt impelled and able to resolve. The Sayyid was moved to tears by the youthful enthusiasm, the sincerity and serene confidence to which the countenance of Mulla Husayn so admirably testified. He sent immediately for some of the works written by Sheikh Ahmed and Sayyid Kazim, and began to question Mulla Husayn regarding those passages which had excited his disapproval and surprise. To each reference, the messenger replied with characteristic vigor, with masterly knowledge and befitting modesty.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll just pause there, just to analyze what's happened. So, on this journey, Mulla Husayn decides to go from Karbala. Now, what is Mulla Husayn wearing as he's going along? He didn't have any shoes, are the reports we have. He's wearing a shirt that doesn't even have buttons. Okay, this is the way in which Mulla Husayn is dressed as he's going across. He was a poor. He wasn't a person of great wealth. He then goes all the way along, reaches Isfahan to see Muhammad Baghi Rashti. Okay, this Isfahani guy, Muhammad Baghi Rashti, and he sees them and he goes to approach him, and he says, "Excuse me, excuse me." And people look at him. They turn around and they say, "What is this guy like? Doesn't even proper clothes." And they say, "Shh, he's talking." And he says, "Yes, I would like to share something. I've come to share a message." And then one of his disciples shuts him down really harshly and just basically says, "The way you're dressed, what are you doing? You're not doing this." And the way, the elegance in which Mulla Husayn spoke, all of a sudden, Muhammad Baghi Rashti was like, "Okay, let him speak." Mulla Husayn then expresses and says, "Look, I've been sent to come and figure out why it is you used to support us and you now no longer do." Then Muhammad Baghi Rashti says, "Okay, we'll discuss this later." And Mulla Husayn says, "Please, look, time is short. Let's do this now. What's the situation? What's going on?" And he says, "Look, well, I used to support Sheikh Ahmed and Sayyid Kazim, and I was totally down, but now they're saying some kind of strong things and some interesting things. Of course, they're talking about the very imminent coming of the Ga'im, which again, bear in mind, if you believe in the Ga'im, if you believe in the Bab, will lead to almost death. It's almost blasphemous for a lot of people. Your life will be ruined or brightened, depending on how you see it." So he's just very much umming and ahhing, and he's just blown away by the way in which Mulla Husayn is talking to him.
He continued in this manner in the presence of the assembled disciples to expound the teachings of Sheikh Ahmed and Sayyid Kazim, to vindicate their truth and to defend their cause, until the time when the Muazzahin, calling the faithful to prayer, suddenly interrupted the flow of his argument. The next day, he similarly, in the presence of a large and representative assembly, and whilst facing the Sayyid, resumed his eloquent defense of the high mission entrusted by an almighty providence to Sheikh Ahmed and his successor. A deep silence fell upon his hearers. They were seized with wonder at the cogency of his argument and the tone and manner of his speech. The Sayyid publicly promised that on the following day he would himself issue a written declaration wherein he would testify to the eminence of the position held by both Sheikh Ahmed and Sayyid Kazim, and would pronounce whosoever deviated from their path as one who has turned aside from the faith of the Prophet himself. He would likewise bear witness to their penetrative insight and their correct and profound understanding of the mysteries which the faith of Muhammad enshrined. The Sayyid redeemed his pledge and with his own hand penned the promised declaration. He wrote at length, and in the course of his testimony paid a tribute to the character and learning of Mulla Husayn. He spoke in glowing terms of Sayyid Kazim, apologized for his former attitude, and expressed the hope that in the days to come he might be enabled to make amends for his past and regrettable conduct towards him. He read himself to his disciples the text of this written testimony and delivered it unsealed to Mulla Husayn, authorizing him to share its contents with whomsoever he pleased, that all might know the extent of his devotion to Sayyid Kazim. No sooner had Mulla Husayn retired than the Sayyid charged one of his trusted attendants to follow in the footsteps of the visitor and to find out the place where he was residing. The attendant followed him to a modest building which served as a madrasa and saw him enter a room which, except for a worn-out mat which covered its floor, was devoid of furniture. He watched him arrive, offer his prayer of thanksgiving to God, and lie down upon that mat with nothing to cover him except his abba. Having reported to his master all that he had observed, the attendant was again instructed to deliver to Mulla Husayn the sum of 100 tuman, and to express the sincere apologies of his master for his inability to extend to so remarkable a messenger a hospitality that befitted his station. To this offer, Mulla Husayn sent the following reply: "Tell your master that his real gift to me is the spirit of fairness with which he received me, and the openness which prompted him, despite his exalted rank, to respond to the message which I, a lowly stranger, brought him. Return this money to your master, for I, as a messenger, ask for neither recompense nor reward. We nourish your souls for the sake of God. We seek from you neither recompense nor thanks. My prayer for your master is that earthly leadership may never hinder him from acknowledging and testifying to the truth. Haji Sayyid Muhammad Baqir died before the year 60 AH, the year that witnessed the birth of the faith proclaimed by the Bab. He remained to his last moment a staunch supporter and fervent admirer of Sayyid Kazim."
Thank you very much. So Mulla Husayn, while he's there, he has the conversation, and lo and behold, of course, Mulla Husayn, who apparently, when it came to debating, was a master. He was someone so incredibly well versed in the Quran and so in love with the faith of Islam, as the Babis were, as the Baha'is are right now, right? So he's there and he has this conversation, and Sayyid Muhammad Baqir Rashdi, the big eminent Islamic scholar, is just blown away. He's just absolutely blown away. And he says, yes, you've answered every single one of my questions. And I tell you what, I will follow. I will believe. And he writes this letter and reads it out loud, praising Sayyid Kazim, praising Sayyid Kazim, how much he's very much on board with the whole thing. The mission has been accomplished, the first part of the mission. He then goes to retreat. He goes to a madrasa, which is like a religious school. Sayyid Muhammad Baqir Rashdi says to one of his disciples, says, go and follow him. Go and see where he's staying. Is he staying in the Ritz? Is he staying in the Hilton? Of course not. He's staying in the madrasa. He's got this little rug that he puts out. And he goes to sleep with just his abba, his kind of cloak on top of it. He then goes and reports this back to Sayyid Muhammad Baqir Rashdi. And he's like, right, give him some money. 100 tomans. Go and give him 100 tomans. He goes up to him and tries to give him 100 tomans. Mulla Husayn had absolutely no need for it. Wasn't interested in one little bit. He says, the fact that you listened to me fairly, that you heard me out, that's the real gift. So detached he was. Part 2. He must go on now. Where's he going to go? He's going to be heading up to Mashhad to try and win the support now of Mirza Askari. Or any comments or questions, by all means, feel free to.
I have a question. Who's Baha'u'llah?
So the Bab, as you know, means the gate. It was the Arabic word for the gate. The Baha'u'llah means the gate of the gate. So Mulla Husayn, because he was the first person to find the Bab, he was the gate to the gate. So that's a title for Mulla Husayn. That's one of Mulla Husayn's titles.
This is really how amazing and, as you say, astounding the whole account is of these twin individuals who preceded the dawn of the Bab's revelation and Baha'u'llah's revelation, and how the beloved guardian, and indeed, of course, Nabil, introduces them. One small thing that I discovered in my life was that in the Holy Quran, there is a chapter there, chapter 5, verse 23. It's really the story of Moses encouraging his people to enter the Holy Land from Egypt. Moses invites or counsels his people to enter the city, the holy city. People interpret this, of course, to enter the Holy Land. The people say, we will not go there. The next verse says in the Holy Quran that there were two individuals just outside the Bab telling the people, please enter this city through the Bab. It's astounding. Two individuals graced by the Almighty with knowledge and wisdom, Dave, these two individuals tell the mass of humanity or the mass of the people, please enter the divine city through the Bab. Udkhulu al-Bab. Rajulan, two. Tahire, who of course was an incredible disciple, she concludes that those two individuals were Sheikh Ahmed and Sayyid Kazim. An astounding, who would, 1,300 years ago, that's in the book, and it doesn't really make sense, but when you see the context of these two individuals, Sayyid Kazim and Sheikh Ahmed, inviting people to go to the divine city, which is the cause of the Bab and Baha'u'llah, through the Bab himself. The other small thing, which always astounds me all my life, is that this Mulla Husayn, this incredible youth, he tells Sayyid Baqir Shafti or Rashti, look, if you don't listen to me, you will damage the cause of Islam. Or not supporting this message disrupts the cause of Islam. Can you imagine, as a believer in that revelation, we are now actually, by reading this Dawnbreakers, by identifying with this message, supporting the cause of Islam, Dave. Extraordinary, really, this connection and this strength of his conviction. And always the Guardian says, or Nabil says, he was speaking with detachment, with severance, with purity. All of these attributes in 1932, which the Baha'i world needed. So you see, this is my sense that the Dawnbreaker is actually not just describing in the beautiful way you're saying, but is actually prescribed, descriptive. Sorry to interrupt, boss.
We're very blessed to have Dr. Fanan Apazir, a remarkable scholar, here with us, who was many fruits for us as we go along.
Having filled the first part of his mission, Mulla Husayn dispatched this written testimony of Haji Sayyid Muhammad al-Baqir to his master in Karbala and directed his steps towards Mashhad, determined to deliver to the best of his ability the message which he was charged to give to Mirza Askari. Immediately, the letter, enclosing the Sayyid's written declaration, was delivered to Sayyid Kazim. The latter was so rejoiced that he forthwith sent to Mulla Husayn his reply, expressing his grateful appreciation of the exemplary manner in which he had discharged his trust. He was so delighted with the answer they had received that, interrupting the course of his lecture, he read out to the disciples both the letter of Mulla Husayn and the written testimony enclosed in that letter. He afterwards shared with him the epistle which he himself had written to Mulla Husayn in recognition of his remarkable service he had rendered him. In it said, Kazim paid such glowing tribute to his high attainments, to his ability, and to the character that a few among those who heard it suspected that Mulla Husayn was the promised one, was that promised one to whom their master unceasingly referred, the one whom he so often declared to be the living in the very midst, and yet to have remained unrecognized by them all. That communication enjoined upon Mulla Husayn the fear of God, urged him to regard it as the most potent instrument with which to withstand the onslaught of the enemy, the distinguishing feature of every true follower of faith. It was couched in such terms of tender affection that no one who read it could doubt that the writer was bidding farewell to his beloved disciple, and he had entertained no hope of ever meeting him again in this world.
Thank you so much, Pam. Thank you so much. So you'll see that Mulla Husayn has done it again. He's gone to Isfahan. He's managed to win over the favor of none other than Sayyid Muhammad Baqir Rashti. After that, he goes to Mashhad and he's speaking to Mirza Askari. And again, he goes in there so humble, so pure, so in love with Islam, so in love with this new understanding he has from the Shaykhi understanding about what's going to happen. And he speaks to Mirza Askari, Mashhadi, and sure enough, he's on board as well. These 2 letters are sent back to none other than Sayyid Kazim, who's here in Karbala. Sayyid Kazim is so excited, he's so happy, that in the middle of teaching, he stops and he says, wait, to all the disciples, look. And he reads out this letter of support that he's got from Sayyid Muhammad Baghir Rashdi in Isfahan. And he reads this glowing tribute. And then he also reads the letter that Mulla Husayn sent him. And then he speaks so highly of Mulla Husayn. But he also speaks in such a way that it seems like these 2 characters are not going to meet again. Now remember, the Bab, the Ghaem, would not appear until they had both passed away. Sheikh Ahmed had passed away and Sayyid Kazim had passed away. So Mulla Husayn's meant to be making his way back. Sayyid Kazim speaking in a way that they're not going to meet again. Is this implying that it's about to happen, that it's around the corner?
Could you give us a little understanding of how you have all these different sheikhs and the sort of history of it? It sounds to me like it's like different churches. Sorry if I'm using Christian terminology. And each person has a leader with a group of disciples that then study and read the Quran and then come to understandings. Is that how it works? And then each support each other, or?
Yeah, so from what I understand, and again, and Dr. Fanon Apazir would be best placed to answer this fully, but I'll give an explanation that may suffice. So with Islam, we know that more or less, roughly speaking, 90% of the Islamic world are Sunni Muslims, and 10% roughly are Shias. They're Shia Muslims, and the Shias believe that after Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, after he passed away, Imam Ali, the Prophet's son-in-law and cousin, was the first person to take over, kind of the first guardian of the faith, and then the imamates carried on all the way down until this return that we have. The Sunnis believe in these caliphates, these 4 people, with the 4th one being Ali as well, actually. So it's 2 slightly different branches, if you like, and this is slightly simplistic. In Iran, the majority are Shia. They're Shia Muslims. So they all believe in these, of the 12ers, the majorities are the Shias. But within Shia, you also have different kind of branches, from what I understand. The Sufis, I believe, are part of the Shia sect, who are a bit more mystical, and you'll have the whirling dervishes, and then you also have the Sheikhs, who are also a bunch who interpreted things in a different way. But generally, you'd have these different mullahs, like these different priests, and they would all be preaching Islam. In fact, quite often when you speak to Muslims, they won't separate themselves as I'm a Shia, I'm a Sunni. They'll just say I'm a Muslim, and someone who believes in Islam, who submits to the will of God. So to put it in Christian terms, it's, from what I understand, it's predominantly one church with the way Iran would be, with a whole bunch of different priests, all teaching very similar things, but you'll get some differences within those churches. So I don't know if that satisfies your question.
Thanks, that helps. Thank you.
In those days, Sayyid Kazim became increasingly aware of the approach of the hour at which the promised one was to be revealed. He realized how dense were those veils that hindered the seekers from apprehending the glory of the concealed manifestation. He accordingly exerted his utmost endeavor to remove gradually, with caution and wisdom, whatever barriers might stand in the way of the full recognition of that hidden treasure of God. He repeatedly urged his disciples to bear in mind the fact that he whose advent they were expecting would appear neither from Jabulgha nor from Jabusa. He even hinted at his presence in their very midst. You behold him with your own eyes, he often observed, and yet recognize him not. To his disciples who questioned him regarding the signs of the manifestation, he would say, he is of noble lineage. He is a descendant of the Prophet of God, of the family of Hashem. He is young in age and is possessed of innate knowledge. His learning is derived not from the teachings of Sheikh Ahmed, but from God. My knowledge is but a drop compared with the immensity of his knowledge. My attainment's a speck of dust in the face of the wonders of his grace and power. Nay, immeasurable is the difference. He is of medium height, abstains from smoking, and is of extreme devoutness and piety. Certain of the Sayyid's disciples, despite the testimonies of their master, believed him to be the promised one, for in him they recognized the signs which he was eluding. Among them was a certain Mullah Husayn, who went so far as to make public this belief, whereupon the Sayyid was sore displeased and would have cast him out from the company of his chosen followers had he not begged forgiveness and expressed his repentance for his action. Sheikh Hassan al-Zunuzi himself informed me that he too entertained such doubts, that he prayed to God that if his supposition was well-founded, he should be confirmed in his belief, and if not, that he should be delivered from such idle fancy. I was so perturbed, he once related to me, that for days I could neither eat nor sleep. My days were spent in the service of Sayyid Kazim, to whom I was greatly attached. One day at the hour of dawn, I was suddenly awakened by Mullah Noruz, one of his intimate attendants. In great excitement, bade me arise and follow him. We went to the house of Sayyid Kazim, where we found him fully dressed, wearing his abba, and ready to leave his home. He asked me to accompany him. A highly esteemed and distinguished person, he said, has arrived. I feel it incumbent upon us to both to visit him. The morning light had just broken when I found myself walking with him through the streets of Karbala. We reached a house at the hour, at the door of which stood a youth, as if expectant to receive us. He wore a green turban, and his countenance revealed an expression of humility and kindliness, which I can never describe. He quietly approached us, extended his arms towards Sayyid Kazim, and lovingly embraced him. His affability and loving kindness singularly contrasted with a sense of profound reverence that characterized the attitude of Sayyid Kazim towards him. Speechless and with bowed head, he received the many expressions of affection and esteem which that youth greeted him. We were soon led to the upper floor of that house and entered a chamber bedecked with flowers and redolent of the loveliest perfume. He bade us to be seated. We knew not, however, what seats we actually occupied. So overpowering was the sense of delight which seized us. We observed a silver cup which had been placed in the center of the room, which our youthful host, soon after we were seated, filled to overflowing and handed to Sayyid Kazim, saying, "A drink of the pure beverage shall their Lord give them." Sayyid Kazim held the cup with both hands and quaffed it. A feeling of reverent joy filled his being, a feeling which he could not suppress. I too was presented with a cupful of that beverage, though no words were addressed to me. All that was spoken at that memorable gathering was the above-mentioned verse of the Quran. Soon after, the host arose from his seat and, accompanying us to the threshold of the house, bade us farewell. I was mute with wonder and knew not how to express the cordiality of his welcome, the dignity of his bearing, the charm of that face, and the delicious fragrance of that beverage. How great was my amazement when I saw my teacher quaff without the least hesitation that holy draught from a silver cup, the use of which, according to the precepts of Islam, is forbidden to the faithful. I could not explain the motive which could have induced the Sayyid to manifest such profound reverence in the presence of that youth, a reverence which even the sight of the shrine of the Sayyidu Shohada had failed to excite. 3 days later, I saw that same youth arrive and take his seat in the midst of the company of the assembled disciples of Sayyid Kazim. He sat close to the threshold, and with the same modesty and dignity of bearing listened to the discourse of the Sayyid. As soon as his eyes fell upon that youth, the Sayyid discontinued his address and held his peace, whereupon one of his disciples begged him to resume the argument, which he had left unfinished. "What more shall I say?" replied the Sayyid Kazim, as he turned his face towards the Bab. "Lo, the truth is more manifest than the ray of light that has appeared in that lap." I immediately observed the ray to which the Sayyid referred had fallen upon the lap of that same youth whom we had recently visited. "Why is it," that questioner inquired, "that you neither reveal his name nor identify his person?" To this the Sayyid replied by pointing his finger to his own throat, implying, that were he to divulge his name, they would both be put to death instantly. This added still further to my perplexity. I had already heard my teacher observe that so great is the perversity of this generation, that were he to point with his finger to the promised one and say, he indeed is the beloved, the desire of your hearts and mine, they would still fail to recognize and acknowledge him. I saw the Sayyid actually point out with his finger the ray of light that had fallen on that lamp, and yet none among those who were present seemed to apprehend its meaning. I, for my part, was convinced that the Sayyid himself could never be the promised one, but that a mystery inscrutable to us all lay concealed in that strange and attractive youth. Several times I ventured to approach Sayyid Kazim and seek from him an elucidation of this mystery. Every time I approached him, I was so overcome by a sense of awe which his personality so powerfully inspired, that many a time I heard him remark, "O Sheikh Hassan, rejoice that your name is Hassan, praiseworthy. Hassan, your beginning, and Hassan, your end. You have been privileged to attain the day of Sheikh Ahmed. You have been closely associated with me, and in the days to come, yours shall be the inestimable joy of beholding what eye hath seen not, ear heard not, nor any heart conceived."
Thank you. Thank you. So beautifully read. Such a powerful, powerful thing that's taking place here. So we're learning this story of Sheikh Hassan al-Zunusi around 3 o'clock in the morning. There's a knock on his door. He's then woken up and he's told to go to the house of Sayyid Kazim. He goes to the house of Sayyid Kazim, and what happens? Sayyid Kazim comes out, and then they walk and they go to somebody else's house. They go to this youth's house. They go there and they're silent the entire way. This youth opens the door. They go in together. Nothing is said. They sit down. And then, with a silver cup, a drink is poured. A drink is poured and is given to Sayyid Kazim. Now, Sheikh Hassan al-Zunusi knows full well that Sayyid Kazim is not going to drink from a silver cup. Sayyid Kazim knows the laws of Islam inside out, and he knows it's forbidden to drink from a silver cup. So that's not going to happen. A drink of pure beverage their Lord shall give them. This quote from the Quran. That is said. Sayyid Kazim takes the cup and he drinks from the silver cup. Sheikh Hassan al-Zunusi, who's a disciple, is like, okay, I'll do the same. We're drinking from silver cups today. I don't know what this is about. Now, of course, we know that this is something that's significant. It's signalizing a break from the laws of Islam, that things are changing. This is what this is all about. And Sayyid Kazim drunk, knowing full well who that youth was. Of course, that youth was none other than His Holiness Sayyid Ali Muhammad the Bab. They then come back from the house, but Sheikh Hassan al-Zunusi still doesn't fully understand who this person is. He doesn't recognize him to be the beloved of his heart's desire. He doesn't recognize him to be that. But he also sees this sort of love that Sayyid Kazim has for this character, who he doesn't even have for Imam Husayn, who was so important, who's buried in Karbala. And he's a little bit confused, he's a little bit perplexed. And he wants to go and ask Sayyid Kazim a few times, who exactly was that guy? Sorry, who was he? But some power stops him. The next scene that it jumps to is none other than Sayyid Kazim, who's in his class, who's giving a class. And he's giving this class and he's talking to his disciples. And he's sharing everything he can, and he's expounding on these different things. And Sheikh Hassan al-Zunusi is there watching. When all of a sudden, in the middle of saying what he was saying, he just pauses. And he says, when the Qa'im comes, when he returns, it will be as clear as that ray of light that's coming through the window and landing on that lap. Of course, there was a window there and the sunbeam was coming in. But Sheikh Hassan al-Zunusi realizes he's pointing to the lap of that same person that we've gone to visit. Is this a coincidence? What could this be? Sayyid Kazim then tells Sheikh Hassan al-Zunusi, he says to him, Sheikh Hassan, rejoice that your name is Hassan praiseworthy. So you've met Sheikh Ahmed, you've met Sayyid Kazim, and he's basically hinting that he's also met the Qa'im. But he's still not sure, it still hasn't clocked for him.
I often felt the urge to seek alone the presence of that Hashemite youth and to endeavor to fathom his mystery. I watched him several times as he stood in an attitude of prayer at the doorway of the shrine of the Imam Husayn. So wrapped was he in his devotions that he seemed utterly oblivious of those around him. Tears rained down from his eyes, and from his lips fell words of glorification and praise, of such power and beauty as even the noblest passages of our sacred scriptures could not hope to surpass. The words, "O God, my beloved, my heart's desire," were uttered with a frequency and ardor that those of the visiting pilgrims who were near enough to hear him instinctively interrupted the course of their devotions and marveled at the evidences of piety and veneration which that youthful countenance evinced. Like him, they were moved to tears, and from him they learned the lesson of true adoration. Having completed his prayers, that youth, without crossing the threshold of the shrine and without attempting to address any words to those around him, would quietly return to his home. I felt the impulse to address him, but every time I ventured an approach, a force that I could neither explain nor resist detained me. My inquiries about him elicited the information that he was a resident of Shiraz, that he was a merchant by profession, and did not belong to any of the
ecclesiastical clergy, religious.
I was moreover informed that he and also his uncles and relatives were among the lovers and admirers of Sheikh Ahmed and Sayyid Kazim. Soon after, I learned that he had departed to Najaf on his way to Shiraz. That youth has set my heart aflame. The memory of that vision haunted me. My soul was wedded to his till the day when the call of a youth from Shiraz, proclaiming himself to be the Bab, reached my ears. The thought instantly flashed through my mind that such a person could be none other than the self-made youth whom I had seen in Karbala, the youth of my heart's desire. When later on I journeyed from Karbala to Shiraz, I found that he had set out on a pilgrimage to Mecca and Medina. I met him on his return and endeavored, despite the many obstacles in my way, to remain in close association with him. When subsequently he was incarcerated in the fortress of Makul, in the province of Azerbaijan, I was engaged in transcribing the verses which he dictated to his
amanuensis secretary.
Every night for a period of 9 months, during which he was a prisoner in that fort, he revealed, after he had offered his evening prayer, a commentary on a juz of the Quran. At the end of each month, a commentary on the whole of that sacred book was thus completed. During his incarceration in Makul, 9 commentaries on the whole of the Quran had been revealed by him. The texts of these commentaries were entrusted in Tabriz to the keeping of a certain Sayyid Ibrahim Khalil, who was instructed to conceal them until the time for their publication might arrive. Their fate is unknown until now.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you very much. So this beautiful scene that, I'm sorry, if there's any comments or questions, feel free to jump in. But we've got this beautiful scene that's taking place in Karbala. Karbala, as we've mentioned, is where the shrine of Imam Husayn is. Imam Husayn being the 3rd Imam of Shia Islam. And we've discussed before where we have this thing that we call Ashura, which you may have seen where in Iran you'll see followers of Islam smashing themselves on the back, causing themselves to bleed because of the brutal murder that took place, the brutal martyrdom of Imam Husayn. It's a very, very special, very significant, especially for the Shias. So Sheikh Hassan al-Nusi, he's there in Karbala, and he sees that same Hashemite youth, the same youth, the Bab, is there and he's praying, "O God, my beloved, my heart's desire. O God, my beloved, my heart's desire." And he's saying this and tears are raining down his face as he's really, absolutely in love, and he's there praying at the shrine of Imam Husayn. So much so that other people who are involved in their devotions as well, they start crying as well. And everyone has a big old cry, and they're so in love with what's happening before them. We then know that Sheikh Hassan al-Nusi He then hears that after this, the Bab goes down and he goes down towards Shiraz. Years later, he then finds out that this call from Shiraz had come, someone who's claiming to be the Qa'im. And he's like, I knew it, I think. Like, this is the one. It's only when the Bab goes on his pilgrimage and he comes back that afterwards Sheikh Hassan al-Zanussi does all he can to stay close to him. It then talks about how later on, when in the mountains of Azerbaijan, up here in this northwestern region of Iran, in the prison fortress of Marku, which is up here, and Chehreg, which is here, he ends up being his amanuensis, his secretary. Whilst in Marku, he would produce every day a 30th of the Quran, a commentary on the 30th of the Quran. So after 30 days, after 1 month, that was one commentary. That there were 9 commentaries, 9 explanations on the entire Quran that were written by the Bab. But apparently we have 2 of them from sources in Haifa. That's what they're saying.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I'm trying to focus and stuff, so I may have missed some parts, but I'm not sure. Can you confirm that the Bab and Sayyid Kazim met, or the Bab and Sheikh Ahmed met before he proclaimed himself?
Yeah, so the Bab actually spent a bit of time with Sayyid Kazim, seemingly as a disciple. I don't think it was quite as a disciple, but he would attend some of Sayyid Kazim's lectures. So the story that I shared about the light coming through, when Sayyid Kazim says, it's as clear as this ray of light that comes through, this is where the Bab is in Sayyid Kazim's class. The other story was where Sheikh Hassan al-Zanussi is woken in the middle of the night and goes with Sayyid Kazim, and they both go and visit the Bab. So yes, they had indeed met. And also, earlier on, someone says to Sayyid Kazim, they said, if you know who he is, why don't you just tell us? What's all this like go and figure it out stuff? Like, it's not a murder mystery. Why don't you just tell us who it is if you know who it is right now? And this is where Sayyid Kazim just responds. And he says, this is why. And he makes this point, that if I reveal who he is, we'll be killed. This is the seriousness, the gravitas of what's happening. Someone claiming to be the Qa'im, it's not going to go down well. It's going to actually cleave. It's going to destroy things. It reminds me of a little story, completely unrelated. There was this Muslim friend who was arguing with a Baha'i and says, look, you and your Baha'i or your Baha'u'llah, what has Baha'u'llah ever done? Prophet Muhammad, we have it here. It says that he cleft the moon in twain. He's cut the moon in 2. What did Baha'u'llah ever do? The Baha'i responds and says, well, Baha'u'llah's the one who put it back together, which is quite ridiculous. Just a joke. Anyway, I see Yvette Hakim sitting there in the stands. Could I ask you, please, unless there's any other questions, to continue reading?
In connection with one of these commentaries, the Bab one day asked me, which do you prefer, this commentary which I have revealed, or the As-Sunnah al-Khasis, my previous commentary on the Suri of Joseph? Which of the 2 is superior in your estimation? To me, I replied, the As-Sunnah al-Khasis seems to be endowed with greater power and charm. He smiled at my observation and said, you are as yet unfamiliar with the tone and tenor of this later commentary. The truths enshrined in this will more speedily and effectively enable the seeker to attain the object of his quest. I continued to be closely associated with him until the great encounter of Sheikh Tabarsi. When informed of that event, the Bab directed all his companions to hasten to that spot and extend every assistance in their power to Qudus, his heroic and distinguished disciple. Addressing me one day, he said, but for my incarceration in the Jabal al-Shadid, the fortress of Shirik, it would have been incumbent upon me to lend my personal assistance to my beloved Qudus. Participation in that struggle is not enjoined upon you. You should proceed to Karbala and should abide in that holy city, inasmuch as you are destined to behold with your own eyes the beauteous countenance of the promised Husayn. As you gaze upon that radiant face, do also remember me. Convey to him the expression of my loving devotion. He again emphatically added these words, verily I say, I have entrusted you with a great mission. Beware lest your heart grow faint, lest you forget the glory with which I have invested you. Soon after, I journeyed to Karbala and lived as bidden in that holy city. Fearing that my prolonged stay in that center of pilgrimage might excite suspicion, I decided to marry. I started to earn my livelihood as a scribe. What afflictions befell me at the hands of the sheikhs, those who professed to be the followers of Sheikh Ahmed, and yet failed to recognize the Bab. Mindful of the counsels of that beloved youth, I patiently submitted to the indignities inflicted upon me. For 2 years I lived in that city. Meanwhile, that holy youth was released from his earthly prison and through his martyrdom was delivered from the atrocious cruelties that had beset the closing years of his life. 16 lunar months, less 20 and 2 days, had elapsed since the day of the martyrdom of the Bab, when on the day of Arifah, in the year 1267 AH, while I was passing by the gate of the inner courtyard of the shrine of the Imam Husayn, my eyes for the first time fell upon Baha'u'llah. What shall I recount regarding the countenance which I beheld? The beauty of that face, those exquisite features which no pen or brush dare describe, his penetrating glance, his kindly face, the majesty of his bearing and the sweetness of his smile, the luxuriance of his jet black flowing locks left an indelible impression upon my soul. I was then an old man, bowed with age. How lovingly he advanced towards me. He took me by the hand and in a tone which at once betrayed power and beauty, addressed me in these words: "This very day I have purposed to make you known as a Babi throughout Karbala." Still holding my hand in his, he continued to converse with me. He walked with me all along the market street, and in the end he said, "Praise be to God that you have remained in Karbala and have beheld with your own eyes the countenance of the promised Husayn." I recalled instantly the promise which had been given me by the Bab. His words, which I had regarded as referring to a remote future, I had not shared with anyone. These words of Baha'u'llah moved me to the depths of my being. I felt impelled to proclaim to a heedless people at that very moment and with all my soul and power the advent of the promised Husayn. He bade me, however, repress my feelings and conceal my emotions. "Not yet," he breathed into my ears. "The appointed hour is approaching. It has not yet struck. Rest assured and be patient." From that moment, all my sorrows vanished. My soul was flooded with joy. In those days, I was so poor that most of the time I hungered for food. I felt so rich, however, that all the treasures of the earth melted away into nothingness when compared with that which I had already possessed. Such is the grace of God. To whom he will, he giveth it. He verily is of immense bounty.
Thank you so much. So beautifully read. What a moving passage. How beautiful. How very, very beautiful is this? Again, we know he met Sheikh Ahmed. He met Sayyid Kazim. He met His Holiness the Bab. From when the Bab came back with pilgrimage, he was with him. He traveled up. He was a amanuensis for a long time. He wanted to go to the fort of Sheikh Tabasi. We know one of the 3 battles that takes place in Mazandaran. He wanted to go and help Qaddus, but that wasn't to be his task. He was told by the Bab whilst in the prison of Maku that he should actually head down to Karbala and he should wait in Karbala because he will meet the one whom God shall make manifest. He would meet Baha'u'llah. He goes down there and he waits, and while he's waiting, he's having this terrible time with other sheikhs. The other sheikhs who are meant to be on his side, who are supposedly following Sheikh Ahmed, are now saying, "No, you've gone rogue, you're into this other guy, blah, 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 you're not one of us," giving him loads of grief. My favorite thing from this is, so to not arouse suspicion, and I don't know if this is a normal thing to do, he's like, "I'm going to be here for a while, maybe a couple of years. I might as well get married." That's what motivated him to get married. He's like, "Excuse me, would you mind getting married? Because I'm going to be here for a while." Not to arouse suspicion. And then I believe it to be in the year 1852, or thereabouts. That's when, 1851, 1852, that's when he sees Baha'u'llah. And that beautiful, beautiful description we have of Baha'u'llah, which just, you could just read it again and again. His penetrating glance, his kindly face, the majesty of his bearing, the sweetness of his smile, the luxuriance of his jet black hair flowing from his locks, left an indelible impression upon my soul. Such a love story this is. And then he talks about how he grabs his hand and they walk through the bazaar, through the markets. How crazy is this? And it's not that long ago either. Ladies and gentlemen, time is not on our side, unfortunately. It is 7:30. It's time for an end. These sessions are an hour and a half long. I'd love to do them for like 6 hours, if I'm completely honest with you, but I figure people might not want to do that. So we will just stick with this. Thank you very much to everyone who read. Are there any comments or questions related to this text that anyone would like to bring up?
Dave, I just wondered if you could either do this in a message, if it's easier, rather than say it on here. Well, who is the narrator, or are there several narrators like there is with the Bible? I'm struggling with who's talking at which time. Maybe it's because I've not joined from the beginning.
Sandra, if you're struggling with who's talking at what time, it means you are doing the dawn breakers. That's part and parcel of it. Believe me, it gets a little bit confusing. The main narrator is Nabil. This guy Nabil, who's gone around and got the notes. But sometimes it will switch into different people talking. So right now, this account is from somebody by the name of Sheikh Hassan Az-Zunusi. That's who's speaking now. So it is a bit difficult. So you'll see in this next paragraph, it says, I now return after this digression to my theme. That's now Nabil talking again. So the thing we've just been dealing with was Sheikh Hassan Az-Zunusi who was talking.
Can I make a comment?
Please, yes.
What we see in this passage, what we just read, his eyes befell Baha'u'llah, and that was it. He didn't have to say, oh, there's a Babi, oh, somehow there was an understanding. It's pretty weird how this history goes in these weird ways, you know. I saw him, I said, oh, there he is. I mean, how many people do you bump into every day? You don't say, oh, there's the guy I'm supposed to talk to. It's quite amazing.
Absolutely, unless they're dressed in a policeman's outfit. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. This is exactly how Godus found the Bab. You have this beautiful, but actually we're not there yet, so we're not going to talk about that. But you're so very right. It's the spirit he saw. As soon as he made that connection, he saw that. So yeah, a very, very good point. Thank you. Was that Rick making that? Who was making that point?
That was Rick.
It was. Well, okay, right, amazing. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I believe.
Dave, can you hear me?
Yes.
No, I was just I just wanted to share. Maybe you can also correct me or whoever. Certain people asked that, did Baha'u'llah know of his own station before Siad Chal? But it seems like here, clearly, he already knew who he was. Because, I mean, I've been in some discussions where people thought that only until Siad Chal that he fully understood who his own station was. But yeah, I just find it very fascinating that it clearly states here from the beginning he knew who he was.
Absolutely. My understanding is, it wasn't a case of that's when he suddenly became who he was. They're of a different breed. Absolutely. And if you were, even if you were to look at the Bab as a kid, the innate knowledge that the Bab had, you know, the remarkable things that he could do and the rest of it. So yeah, I think that's just a specific point, a kind of point of go, as it were. But
yeah, it's just good. Yeah, it's just good that we actually have, like, if people do have that question, it's good that you can always refer to this part.
Absolutely. I think I believe that the wife of the Bab who recognized the Bab, you remember the Bab's in his upper chamber, and then she talks about this kind of light emanating from. I think that might have happened before he drunk the blood of the severed head of Imam Husayn. So definitely, no, this is a great example of that.
Yeah.
Dave, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I might have really missed this at the very beginning, but I'm trying to remember who actually wrote the Dawn Breakers, because you said the main narrator is Nabil, but who was the actual writer of the whole book?
So the book itself was done by Abdul Baha's grandson, by Shoghi Effendi. So he's the one who compiled it into book form. And as I said, the first ever language was in English, and it was to create a link for our spiritual ancestors, and it was literally a gift to the Baha'is of the West. So before the Iranians had it, the West had it, and the Guardian was very deliberate in that, to give this as a gift. So yeah, so this was put together by Shoghi Effendi, by the Guardian.
Thank you.
I just want to add one comment on this screen, this text you shared here. And I read this thing, it's really touched my heart. Basically, it says, my soul was flooded with joy. In those days, I was so poor that most of the time I hunger for food, yet I feel so rich. So basically, quick story, it reminds me how beautiful 7 years ago when I first get in touch with Baha'i faith, I remember I was living with this girl, a Chinese girl. Her name is Dorothy, and we were kind of like really poor. And every day I had to travel to the other side of the city to tutor in mathematics in order to earn some money. It's around 20 kwai, I remember at the time, which is like £3. And then I traveled back to our apartment, and we would use £3. We would buy some like Chinese buns, steamed buns, and a bottle of water. And then we were studying Ruhi together at the time. It was really beautiful. So I really miss those days when I was physically very poor, but most of the time I was really happy. So if you may, I might say a prayer in Chinese after the session.
I was going to ask you to do that, Tomahawk. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that story as well. Yeah. Again, this is a love story. This really is a love story. I mean, just his soul's flooded with joy. As we know, with Mulla Husayn, I said he'd walk around without shoes and with a shirt. I think Godus, he had a shirt on that's even ripped, let alone the button. So yeah. Unless there's any questions, I think we'll draw the session to a close. Thank you so much, everyone who's been part of this. And if Tomahawk, you're ready, perhaps if you'd like to share with us a prayer in Chinese, and then after that, whoever wants to go can go, and we can carry on or stay, whatever it is. But thank you so much. The next session of the Dawnbreakers is tomorrow.
上帝啊，我的上帝，我已悔改并转向你，诚然你是宽恕者、怜悯者。上帝啊，我的上帝，我已重返你的怀抱，诚然你是永恒宽恕者、宽仁者。上帝啊，我的上帝，我已紧执你洪恩之灵所，那天地万物的宝库属于你。上帝啊，我的上帝，我已奔向你，诚然你是赦免者、万恩之主。上帝啊，我的上帝，我渴望你仁惠的天国相传，诚然你是赐予者、慷慨者、宽仁者、全能者。上帝啊，我的上帝，我见证你已彰显了自己的圣道，应显了你的允诺。你从仁惠之天降赐了恩典，使蒙恩者的心灵亲近你。凡紧执你坚固之灵所，依附你华美圣袍之鞭者，必蒙福佑。万物之主啊，可见与不可见的万物之主，以你的神力、庄严与威权，求你以荣耀之笔将我的名字录入你钟爱者之列。罪恶者的书卷也难阻挠他们转向你圣容之光耀。啊，聆听祷告，回应祷告的上帝呀！巴哈欧拉。